challenges we'll navigate, helping them become the best and elevate. Oh yeah, rising above, reaching for the sky, unlocking potential we won't deny. In the sweet spot, we'll pave the way, transform the leaders day by day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the Sweet Spot, where IT leaders share the insight with other leaders and others that want to lead. My name is Carlos Vargas, and as in every week, I have my two co-hosts, Howard Holton and Paul Lewis.
Hello.
Traveling again?
Did we license? I am traveling. Did we license that music, or did we make it?
I actually created it. Yeah, that's AI generated.
Wow. It's
Yeah.
It's top 10 easily.
So you know how you'll know when I've been replaced with AI? There's no drinking. That's all I can hear. This because it just occurs to me I drink constantly during podcasts,
Right.
and at some point I'm going to go an entire podcast with no drinking, and then you'll know it's AI.
It's-
There's no way Howard could go 30 minutes without a sip of water.
You know
Or
that would be
soda or
funny
whatever.
if you can include that.
That would be great.
Because
The AI notices that I sip every 3 minutes.
Right. And it just displaces the drink every so often. Something
That'd be
new.
hilarious. That'd be so good.
Yes, I am in Vegas again. I believe. Howard, you going to Moscone this week or
Next week, RSA. What are you out there for this week?
Atlassian conference.
Oh, right.
It is our ITSM tool. It's
Right.
also our paging tool. It's also our project management tool. It's a
Right.
large set of tools. Arguably, it's the ERP. in our
Yes.
organization.
It's an ecosystem to which once you are in, you are in.
Correct. Yes.
Yes.
So it's good.
Atlassian side.
It's good being a customer at a conference, right? That's always fun. Because the last time I was here, I was a vendor, so that's more work, arguably.
Yes. We spoke about your vending last time you were there.
My vending, yes.
my vending.
We had a brilliant setup and a good chat on AI. I think we should do that more often, but logistically, a little bit more complex.
Yes, but I think we'll both be at Snowflake, right?
That's
I think
correct.
that's the plan.
Is that June?
I don't know. It's not my job to keep track of that. I have people over that.
All right. Somewhere in the June.
Yes, I'm going to New Orleans late May. If you'd care to join me.
May. I'm in Halifax. If you'd care to join me.
What's in what's the conference in Halifax?
It's a company conference. So I'm presenting Gen AI to local executives in Halifax and in St. John.
Sure, send me
You
an
can
invite.
come.
I'd be happy to come and
Come and
lend
enjoy.
perspective.
Do you want to
I'm
come to Cancun in June?
That
Yes.
sounds way more interesting.
I'm gonna be at a conference in resort in Cancun. So first week in June. So
I assume you'll be sending us some links because that sounds like something we want to go to.
I think you need to recommend us as speakers. I don't know
Right.
why Paul's letting you get off easy.
That's right. Where's the form? Where's the form we have to fill out to make this happen?
Right. Minneapolis, St. Paul, or Cancun, Mexico. Ooh.
Yes. Last week I did a Midwest tour that started in Minneapolis.
Right. So
I
I
went
started
to-
working on my 4th of July plans.
Oh, yes.
For those that have listened to us before, and you guys know, 4th of July tends to be when Denver Fan Expo or Denver Comic Con happens, right? Comic Con being a trademark thing.
Yep.
And I get on stage and, along with some of my friends, teach people how to play Dungeons and Dragons.
do you have
Maybe
some
we need to
bot
go
or
to
something
that.
new this year?
I do have something new this year. I am building an automation using artificial intelligence that will take a prompt, small or large, and automatically generate a full D&D adventure that is printable and playable and all of those sort of things.
I can't
Cool.
believe you've fallen into the AI trap.
I know. I resisted for so long.
Don't you know?
But it's
So this is a LLM MMORPG. Is this what?
this is an LLM RPG.
Oh no, no
Um,
MM.
There will be a future announcement about the MM portion of what I am working on. Effectively, I think if I can get Patreon people that like the adventures and just kind of want a constant source of adventuring, that can fund a neat little platform that I'm working on for people to play D&D online as they wish. I don't want to say any more because It's pretty involved.
The press release isn't out yet, so everything.
Make sure that you subscribe so you can get the episode that's coming out soon. In a
Yeah.
world.
We will have the information prior to its release, so that'll be
That is correct. You will have the information as early as I can give it and not spoil the
good. I see.
proper registration and claiming of intellectual property.
Are we still under NDA? I thought that expired.
I don't think the NDA works on a public podcast.
I see.
I
So
don't.
looking at that, that's an interesting detail. You talk about NDAs. There was some releases about a week ago or something like that that changed how IT things work when you had to leave a company. But there's something that's still the same, is how internal organizations look at IT guys, or how the IT guys relate to the other people within an organization.
Before we jump into that, do tell me about this NDA stuff, because I saw some content. It's US centric, but like what's now
Not
legal and not
NDA. It was not NDAs. It was
Okay.
non-compete.
Non-compete. Yeah, non-compete.
Specifically.
Yeah.
Right. And effectively, for a very long time, non-competes have been mostly unenforceable. Non-competes were seen as a way to keep people employed at a company, and allow the company to have all the power and to force you to basically stay working for the company or not work in the industry.
Right.
And I forget the court, but 2 decades ago, the court ruled, unless your non-compete is for someone that has specific and specific intellectual property as part of their knowledge, then your non-compete is basically non-enforceable. And it was really specifically around things like financial algorithms. Right. And really, like, you'd have to be able to prove that were they to go to a competitor, just simply the way that they work, the way they do their job, involves utilization of your intellectual property that is truly unique to you. Like, it had a really high bar, but companies still put in non competes.
Right.
And so this was really about saying effectively your non-compete is worthless. Please knock it off. And we're saying it loudly at the federal level.
I see.
Right.
And in a lot of the applications, that was one of the first questions for technology roles. Do you have a non-compete with another company?
Well, with a competitor, in fairness, and the
technically.
reality still is, do you have a non-complete? Do you have a non-disclosure based on your role? Like, there's still some work that has to be done by the hiring people. This doesn't just say learn everything you can from place one and go to competitor one and take all that with you and you're free to do so. That is absolutely not true. It just means we can't prevent you from being hired. We can absolutely sue you for stealing intellectual property.
Right. Sure.
But we cannot prevent you from being hired.
And the definition of competition was always blurry anyway, right? One could easily argue something finite and something like umbrella-like, right? All technology company could be a competitor, or a specific competitor that sells the specific product that you also sell, right? It was easy to try to make it too big from the company's perspective or too small from the employee's perspective.
Yes, and that tends to be kind of how that worked. What's funny is they don't buy that way, right? Like, companies would absolutely say any use of technology infringes on our intellectual property, and therefore you can't do it. Neener. Right. At the same time, at Hitachi, we would take something that worked for one industry and show it to another industry, and they're like, no, just show us what works in our industry.
Right.
Well, that's the dumbest logic in the world. Plus, you don't think that way, not really. Right. So I think it's interesting to see how people twist logic in ways that aren't really logical.
Yeah, if you thought that way, barely any invention or innovation would occur, right? Because you're now focused solely on the, few dozen companies that hopefully invent something interesting versus thousands and tens of thousands of companies that might invent something that's still applicable to you or multiple industries. Yep, I agree. So back to your point, Carlos. It is from an IT perspective, and the only reason why I asked for the competition stuff. It seems clear to me over the last couple quarters of helping, engaging, and leading IT again, that the relationship between IT and the rest of the organization hasn't changed in the 30 years I've been involved doing it. The role of IT has changed a little bit over time. The mandate of IT has changed a little bit over time, but the cultural and communication and interaction still feels very vendor customer relationship, where the vendor, being IT, services the customer, variety of line of businesses and departments, and the customer is always right, and the customer always would prefer better service, faster service, with more features, functions, and products. Whereas I would be under the impression, I think a better relationship would be a peer-based relationship where the only customer is the actual customer, and both the line of business and IT is serving that customer by delivering different services for that company. That's been my philosophy over time, but that hasn't really changed the interaction between IT and the business. Is this just what I see, or do you guys see it the same?
I'd like to say it's just what you see. I'd like to say that every organization that I've ever been in or interacted with or consult to trusts IT implicitly and uses IT as the exclusive authority on technology within the spaces to which they've hired IT to perform.
Yeah. I heard
you know what?
the
I'm just going to stick to that as my answer. That's as though I lived in that universe. It's just 100% true. I was writing fantasy right before this thing happened. I'll just continue writing fantasy.
I see. So you're saying this, you're seeing the same consistency. So let's double click on the why, and then let's double click on the before why. What's the same? Is the relationship between customer and vendor? Is the relationship between deferring to the skill set in the right division? Is it, personality conflicts? Like, what is it? How could you describe it?
I mean, there is an absolute lack of empathy between most people who work in IT and the businesses to which they serve. Right? They don't seem to care and are totally fine being right while being completely wrong at the same time. Please notice only one of those was in air quotes.
Right.
The fact is, you can be completely right and service your customer 0% at the same time. Right. If you doubt me, just call your cable company and complain about your last bill.
Right.
They will be
that's an
completely correct and completely unhelpful at the same time. Right. But IT seems to take that to an artistic level. Right. To believe somehow, not that they're powerless, right? Most customer service is powerless, but that they don't in fact serve the needs of the business and the people that work in the business. And it's strange to me.
And is it because IT has never worked in the business and therefore can't empathize to what the business needs to do day in and day out? And then the reverse, that the business hasn't worked in IT and therefore doesn't appreciate that this is one of 10,000 calls, potentially 5,000 of the same call.
You could say yes, but the truth is it's only the first one that matters. Right? If I'm the customer, I don't care how many calls you've received. I don't care how many of them are the same thing. Right? And therefore, you shouldn't have an attitude like I should care. Right? The reality is I don't need to care. I have a problem. The problem is personal to me. Right. The fact that you've seen this problem 10,000 times before means one of three things, right? Either you've done a terrible job putting the technology in place, or you've done a terrible job training me, or you've done neither of those things because you didn't care, and it's all your fault. Pick any of those three; they're still your fault, right? If you're the technology expert and you put poor technology in place that's causing you to have 5,000 tickets, it seems like a you problem. The business didn't force that. If you haven't done proper rollout training and change control, seems like a you problem. The business didn't do that. And if you just don't care, again, seems like a you problem. The business didn't do that. Right? Now, sure, you as the individual within IT can't control all of those things, but the entity that is IT can absolutely control those things.
Right.
And I have had wild success controlling all three of those things throughout my career. Right? And
So
we've talked about some of them on the podcast before.
So an interesting detail, like you mentioned, that when you don't care about what the customer wants, I work on both sides, the big IT and the smaller ones, or even the consulting side when you consult with entrepreneurs or small businesses that have the money to pay. And like what Howard mentioned is actually very important because the customer doesn't know, they just have a problem. Like literally before this call, I had someone that they're following someone else's instructions, detail everything, but they had a problem.
Right.
And they keep calling, I have a problem. Can you help me? Because you understand my challenge. And I think that the interesting detail is when we don't put ourselves in the other person's shoes, like Howard says, they're calling because they have a problem. Doesn't matter. I have seen the problem. It was a problem with connecting a dongle, a USB-C dongle to the Mac.
Right.
They didn't know how to connect it. And they were having problems because they have too many of them.
Right.
It was just a call, and it's, okay, here's your issue. And it's a friend. I was like, okay, what they told you, yeah, is correct. Take the time, but you need to care about the customer. If you don't care about the customer, you're going to have a problem.
So do you still subscribe to IT being vendor, line of business being customer as a relationship philosophy?
I don't
Or
know that I
is
would.
that a size of IT?
No. I think it's a shared service and thus kind of aligns to the vendor thing. But I think calling them a vendor creates a different relationship. Right. The fact is, I pay a vendor for every single thing the vendor does. I pay a vendor. Right. Have you ever seen an organization that is truly successful at a complete 100% chargeback? So at the end of the year, IT is either a net zero or a profit center.
Right.
No, I've never seen.
And I compare it like legal, finance, HR.
Sure, shared service.
They're also shared services, but the line of business doesn't treat them like a vendor-customer relationship generally.
No, because what makes IT unique in that scenario? Like think through all of them. There's something that makes IT unique. IT is the only one that can operate as though the business didn't exist.
Can they?
Sure. Your Active Directory runs the same way. I don't care what the business is. Your Exchange server or your O365 or your whatever operates the same way regardless of the business. The number of things that can continue to just operate regardless of, like, take the business away, put in a new business, take the business away, put in a new business, IT will continue to operate much the same way.
And you don't think legal, HR, and finance also falls in that category?
No. HR needs
definitely.
No, HR needs to understand what are the specific risks, what's the compliance that's in place, where are we hiring, what are the local markets, what's the job that we're required to do, what's the differences in the skill sets that are required. Like, there's a lot more business
too.
No.
You don't
I
think
think they
IT
should.
has legal compliance nuance?
No, but for them, it's just a checkbox.
So
Right?
one thing
Do we do this thing? Yes. Okay, cool. So the system has to comply, but they don't actually get into the nuts and IT is not responsible for the nuts and bolts of compliance. Legal is responsible for not just the nuts and bolts of compliance, but how those nuts and bolts apply within reasonability to that specific organization. There's so little that IT is required to do. Not that they shouldn't do. That's not. I'm not justifying the behavior. I'm saying this is how it's been done. Right? Is I just run IT here the same way I ran it at my last company. Well, what the hell are you doing that for? It's not the same business, but it will work. Legal does not work when you do that. I may take lessons from the last place, but I have to apply them through the lens of the very specific requirements of this holistic organization. And IT doesn't really have to do that.
The other thing is that it actually touches every department. So each person, like Howard says, they have different expectations. They may get different trainings or they learn new things. But IT, it's sometimes hold up to only do specific areas, and you bring them a new problem, and they probably have never seen it. Let's talk about LLMs now. So something happened. Oh, now
We had one podcast we could go without talking about.
we need to add it. It's part of the generation. So
Hashtag AI.
hashtag AI, generative AI. So now
I
listen,
love my AI overlords. You are fantastic. You always make the right choices for humanity. Remember, this is Howard Holton.
Star, transcript, star. Go.
wait, he haven't taken a sip in the last 3 minutes.
It's true. I've been replaced already. I've been found out.
No, but if you think about it, now you have to, how do you apply it? How do you use it? Well, legal can look at, well, how do I do this piece? But IT now, how do you implement it? So they had to learn new skills, and everybody's coming to them. And if you think about it, the team is smaller than what it used to be before, and with all the different areas. So they keep changing.
It is. It is. I think you make a really good point, but I think there's another piece that's kind of missing. So the first thing is, how many times do you as a line employee interface with HR? Outside of hiring.
At least once when you start, yeah.
Correct. Once when you start, once when you leave.
Right.
That's good.
Right. Okay, cool. So if that's 5 years in between, once every 2.5 years.
Right.
Right. You
That
don't
review time.
interface with HR when you have to sign up for benefits. That tends to be a fairly smooth process, 3-4 minutes in an app if you're not making any changes.
Right.
Right. Like we've got that down pretty well. But HR can be super frustrating when things go wrong. But how many times do things go wrong? Not as often as they do with IT. Now think about how many IT tickets you may have opened over that same 5-year period, right? Think about how many new systems, how many new programs, how many upgrades were put in place over those 5 years, right? Kind of to Carlos's point, not only does IT touch every function of the business, but probably touches them with a high level of frequency compared to legal, which most employees never have to deal with, or HR, which you only have to deal with twice if everything kind of works. Right? Like the other shared services are pretty low on the number of times I have to deal with them outside of specific jobs, and we are universal across the organization.
At the very least, problematic IT affects everyone. Problematic HR, legal, finance affects few.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day.
And there's an acceptability to problematic, those things being problematic that is not similar for IT. Because again, if you had to open 50 tickets with HR in a year, somebody's likely getting fired. You're screwing with people's money, right? You're screwing with their livelihood.
Right.
If you open 50 tickets with IT in a year, I don't know. Maybe that's a good year. I don't know.
That's
Right?
acceptable behavior.
There's not a consistency to it, but it always creates that friction.
Right.
Right. Constantly.
And you think that's one of the distinct differences between the vendor-customer relationship and just the shared service relationship?
Well, I think IT is a shared service. I think to think of them as a vendor is problematic because now it's an us versus them versus a shared service. A shared service is something we can all use and all lean on and all use to get our job done. A vendor is someone that I engage for a specific purpose that has vending, right? There's a cost model associated with it.
Right.
Even if that cost is just, man, are they a pain in the ass? Right.
Right.
And I think just using that language sets up a kind of an adversarial,
immediately.
right, connotation, whereas shared service is not adversarial. Shared service is the thing we all use and benefit
Do you
from.
think there's a distinct difference if the line of business is much more technical? Like the line of business is a technology team, or
Well, I think they get more
service.
dismissive. Yeah. They get
Yeah.
far more dismissive. Right. The more technical they think they are, the more dismissive they are of the expertise held within IT, which is also problematic, which then, of course, doesn't help with the empathy problem that was there to begin with.
right?
Right. The more technical they are, the more likely they are to figure out ways to work around IT and create shadow IT. And that doesn't help anybody at all. I mean, it helps in the near term, but when it
Right.
comes to overall corporate culture and overall, manageability and overall kind of tech footprint and costing and all that other stuff, it doesn't help at all.
And increased risk, increased
It
intellectual
absolutely
property.
increased risk.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the other detail is that sometimes in those orgs, when you have a technical team that is outside IT and they try to offer help and IT doesn't want any help, they may be overloaded or whatever, and they don't want to rely on the people, that also brings the problem that you're describing. And it happens in big and small teams, because then now I have a solution and they go, I don't want your solution. I'm like, but I need to do my job and I need a solution and I have it here. And you tell me, no, it can't be done. And that's when Howard says, okay, I'm going to build it. I'm going to show you that it's possible. And that's when you split and you start using all the solutions for different things.
Well,
But
I mean, that's
go ahead, Howard.
that's the biggest problem right there. It can't be done. No. I know it can be done because I have access to YouTube, and I've seen 14 other people post videos on how this can be done, and it looks like it'll solve my exact problem. Why are you being difficult?
Yeah.
Right. I think the problem is kind of comes back to this thing we discarded in about 97, let's say, within IT, which is called organizational change control. Right. And we just kind of went, nah, that's a lot of work. We're just going to throw that away. Right? Think about an ERP. Organizational change control is anywhere from 60 to 85% of the cost of rolling out an ERP.
Right.
Right. Okay, cool. So I need to save money. Well, I'll just not do the organizational change control. Everybody will just have to deal with the new system.
That's right. Enjoy.
Right. That's that kind of became the solution. So why would I listen to you in the business when ultimately your influence, sure, it may provide a better outcome, but I'm not graded on the outcome anyways. I'm just graded on delivery, not the success of whatever the program was that was put in place. Literally, did I meet the delivery date on time and under budget? And if I involve you, then everything has the potential to change.
But the root cause of that is the scale difference, right? Remember it's an inverse triangle at that point where the business is bigger than IT.
Yeah, by far.
The business will feel like they have much more time and energy and ability to implement technology because there's 100 of them and one person in IT.
100%.
And that one person in IT has 10 things to do and they can only do one thing at a time. Yep. Right. So the pressure of you adding an 11th makes a difference.
Well, just the pressure of you changing one of the 10.
Right.
Right. Like, no. I know what I'm doing. I have a plan. I developed it in a box so I don't have to wait on anybody else to do it. I likely did it at 9:00 one night.
Right.
Right. So I have a plan. I know how to implement this plan. It's a plan I chose because I'm comfortable with it and I know where to go with everything. Just simply by allowing you to interject throws off the timing to some degree. And I already have 10 things to do and I have time for 6.
Right.
Right. I can't make any of the 10 longer. Right. It's unreasonable expectation on top of unreasonable expectation on top of what should be a reasonable expectation, but is immediately an unreasonable expectation because of all the other expectations.
Right.
Right. But again, we're not thinking about it from what is the user experience? What is the customer satisfaction rating? What is the reasonability? What is the organizational change control required for this to be successful in any of those lines? If we did, we'd only do 4 projects a year. They would all be successful and we'd have way different KPIs.
Right. Right. Because in that exact same example, even though you can both watch the same YouTube, the scale difference matters, but more importantly, the risk still is IT. So you could go ahead and implement that thing outside of IT, but IT is the one getting called at 3 a.m. when it's not working.
Yep.
You aren't.
Yeah. What's interesting is it's almost exactly the same thing we do with stuff like office design.
Right.
Right. The bare minimum number of people are allowed to have impact to the architecture and the design. Everyone else is just stuck to deal with it.
Right. You get assigned your desk.
Correct. Even if the people on the committee never would visit or have to use any of those things.
Right.
Right. The exception is if you're the higher ranking people on site, you'll get consulted about the things that matter most to you, and you're only allowed the things that matter most to you, and you'll be pushed out of every other decision.
That's correct.
Right. I've been both sides of those.
The only decision I got to make in those situations was which coffee machine we should buy and put in the kitchen.
Well, that's because they knew you.
Everything else was out of my control.
And did you tell them I wish for a Starbucks barista to be right here?
I started there, but then never worked out that way. Start with the hard one and then
Right.
work down to
Now,
a
the funny
machine.
part was I was at a small company where we were moving to a new headquarters here in Colorado. That's how I ended up in Colorado. And they sat down with the blueprints and went, let's do some office design, without realizing that none of the offices were well designed. Like the layouts weren't. And so they just kind of went, put your initials on whichever office that
Which
you'd
one
like.
you like, yeah.
And then you can circle, like if you have people, you can circle the area for your people. And so I went, well, I have like the second most people and we're growing. So I'm going to take this side. And
Right.
then this is the office that's logically there. So I'll take that office without
Right.
realizing that the office was bigger than your hotel room.
I see.
It was completely and utterly ridiculous for office size.
Did it have a sunken living room kind of deal? Or
That would have been nice, I guess. You know,
had
but I had a
the
desk,
internet.
I had a conference table, I had like 12 feet of whiteboard plus windows, and it was
Nice.
just ridiculous. And a TV.
TV,
And a
nice.
TV. It was just ridiculous. And it's like, on one hand, great. It's great that I got to have an opinion. On the other hand, someone that understood layout should have gone, hey, these offices are pretty big for one person.
Right.
Previously, they had like a little team in there of 4 people. Maybe think about that when you're making your decisions.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, I would have happily taken the office next door and made that a conference room for my entire team instead of taking over one of the only 2 conference rooms we had nearly permanently. Right. So again, like that was definitely a case of you don't know what you don't know and you think you have more expertise than you really do, and
Right.
excluding an expert or an expert allowing themselves to be excluded. I don't remember there was an opportunity for us to talk to an expert. It was just kind of delivered this way.
So we talked about the empathy side, lack thereof on both sides, but we haven't talked about the deference yet. So
Well, let's close the empathy one
Okay,
out, because
okay.
the reality is you can have empathy. You cannot expect empathy from others.
right,
We can wish for it, we can hope for it, but the reality is the only empathy you can control is your own.
Hmm.
Right? So the takeaway should be, am I empathetic enough? And how do I become more empathetic?
right,
Right? When was the last time I had an interaction where I either did or did not use empathy appropriately? And which way is it more consistent for me?
Hmm.
Right? And that doesn't have to be just when you're in IT acting as the supplier, but the other way around as well. When was the last time you interacted with someone who worked in customer service, who worked in IT? Did you have empathy at that point?
Right.
Did you have the required amount of patience? Did you give them the grace to take the time they needed to give you the solution? Or did you start out angry?
Right.
Did you start out not caring about what else they had to do that day?
Or even thinking to yourself, has my other interactions with them loaded the table?
Right.
Therefore, this next interaction I'm about to have with them needs to concede that that table is full.
Well, and
do I
vice
need
versa,
help?
right?
Do I need to help prioritize?
And vice versa, right? So
Yeah.
not just in other interactions, how's it loaded the table from their side, but how's it loaded the table from my side?
Right.
Right? There are some companies that I talk to frequently to customer service because I use the company and that's how I interact with them. United Airlines is a great example.
Right.
Right? I talk to the airline frequently because things change in logistics.
Right.
My destination, my needs may change, but also flights get canceled, flights get moved, planes have problems. So I talk
Right.
to United a lot. Right? How have those previous interactions affected the way I talk to United? As a good example, right? And
Right.
am I loading myself up with preconceived notions based on how those prior things went? Or do I have enough empathy to start from scratch and just go, I'm just talking to a human being who ultimately wants to make me happy, who ultimately wants this to be a good interaction. They don't set out with it being a bad interaction. So anything they give me that's negative likely has nothing to do with me. So let's not add to it. Right? And a big part of that too is, do I have enough time to give the agent so the agent can do the work they need to do? Or am I going to be time boxed? Do I only have 5 minutes to deal with this and this is a 10-minute problem?
Right.
That's actually a very important detail, because most people call IT when they have 2 minutes between a meeting, and then they're upset because this guy's beep, 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 beep,
Right.
don't, or mess up my thing. And it's like, they didn't know about your issue. They're like you said, they're there to help you.
And not all problems can be resolved in 120 seconds. It's just not. It's just
Right. Not all problems can be solved in your on your timetable, whatever that timetable is, right?
Right.
Sometimes that's a 2-minute problem, sometimes that's a 2-week problem. And it's legitimately sometimes a 2-week problem. If I have to take what you say and I have to escalate it internally, and then internally can't solve the problem either and has to escalate to a vendor, and then the vendor's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 support we have to go through. God
Right.
forbid there's a patch that has to be released, and all of that has to come back on
Right.
top of the 900 other tickets I have to work in that time. I apologize that you're not getting the response that you want, that I'm not updating the ticket as quickly as I can, or should. I should. But give me the grace to accept that everyone drops things. You drop things, I drop things, we're all overburdened. Let's just assume we're all overworked. Let's just assume we have 10 hours of things to do every 6 hours.
And more importantly, that we all have good intentions.
Correct.
That we're all trying to solve this problem, and sometimes it's in our control and sometimes it isn't, right? Sometimes there's internal factors that are slowing me down, or external factors are slowing
Same
me
team, same team, same team.
down. Right.
Yep.
Right? Same team. That means we're all working together to accomplish the same thing.
Yes.
Right? That means prop us up, don't knock us down. We are not the opposition. It's same team. We all want the same thing. Just give everyone the grace that we're all same team.
Right.
I think 90% of conflict would go away if we all just started by going, hey, Paul, I'm glad you're on my team. Hey, Howard, I'm glad you're on my team too. And just started from same team.
Which brings me back to my original comment, is that it still feels like, because I hear the words, not even feels, I hear the words explicitly. We are the customer. We are the customer. We are the customer. This is line of business. We're the customer. And therefore, you shall service us in the way we need to. And yet, that doesn't equate to we're on the same team.
No, it doesn't. But it also doesn't mean that the customer listens either. Right? It's required that you listen as a customer.
Right.
Right? Give deference to the fact that you have an expert in the room and listen. And if you listen and ask questions, to Carlos's earlier thing. Okay, I understand this is kind of outside the bounds of what we normally do. In fairness, I watched a YouTube video on it because I was trying to solve a problem and it seems like it had solved my problem exactly. So when you say we can't do that, can you help me understand? Because it seems like this is technically capable.
Right.
This is technically possible.
Right.
Right. And that's very different than what we tend to get. Right. Which is yelling. It's just yelling. It's just,
Right.
you know, it's not actually communicating. It's one person saying the thing they want to say and the other person saying what they want to say, and neither side is listening to the other.
Right.
Right. I just have to say a thing, so I'm going to say a thing, and I don't care if you listen or not because I've already determined how this is going to go.
And you need this self-realization that this 5-minute YouTube video probably doesn't have all the context required for an enterprise implementation.
No, I can make 5-minute YouTube videos that do amazing things if I can create the problem and the solution within the same box.
Right.
Right? Because their point of the YouTube video is to get more clicks. They don't get any more clicks if it doesn't work.
Right.
Right? And they don't get clicks if it's complex and overwhelming.
Right.
Right? They get clicks if it's simple and easy, and it seems like even you, Mr. Non-technical, could do this. See,
Right.
Isn't this easy? Right?
Right. Without
That is-
all the prerequisites already being in place.
Correct.
How
Correct.
to do it in 5 minutes.
Right. What I
That's
would recommend the next time you see that and your IT team says go away is take all of the context and throw it as a comment directly to as a chat directly to that creator and see what you get.
Right.
What you're going to get is, you should talk to IT.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. In reality, there's ways to solve it, but I think that, like Howard mentioned, if you start with, I have a problem, I think that I found a solution. How can we solve it? Help me so I can do my job because I need to do this. And again, in a technical team, it may be that you need to use a different tool that what you're using for whatever reason. Okay, there may be a valid reason. You may have to go through an exception process. You may have to go through something else. but to bring, instead of like, I fix it, you don't know how to fix it, here it is, implement it. That's when it start that fight. And the conversation of I'm the customer when I'm internally in a company, it's actually a little bit challenging because even though it's a customer, like Howard says, we should be on the same team. So it's how can I actually accomplish the job or the role that I'm here for? And in sometimes it's to solve a problem external, sometimes to solve a problem internally. Let's leverage it together and let's work together to make it work.
Especially difficult if it's mutual exclusivity. Line of business 1 requires the switch off. Line of business 2 requires the switch on. Let's discuss.
Yeah, that's where it starts to become like really frustrating, right?
Right.
Is when you have two lines of business that you're trying to answer to, and they have completely different requirements, and they didn't think to talk to each other before they came to IT,
Right.
because they don't necessarily have a way to do that either, right? And so that's another kind of issue that you have is IT as this kind of overwhelmed shared service has to answer to the totality of the business, but the business doesn't answer to the business.
That's right.
Right? The business only answers to their leadership, their cone, their particular piece of the org chart. Right? And if that org chart is really wide, you'll have two people from within the same org chart make similar requests in complete opposition of each other.
Right. And you're relying on the IT to have to be that conduit, that balance between the two. And
there's no reason to do that.
They're going to disappoint one of them at the very
Right.
least. Right? In many ways, there's no winning that conversation.
Yep. Yeah, none whatsoever. Right. It's really interesting when you as we start to unravel this challenge, right? But it still comes back to empathy and deference, right?
Right.
Give people empathy, act with empathy, right? And then give them deference, because in the same way that I have to give someone empathy, I also have to give deference to the fact that they are likely more of an expert
Right.
on some piece of this equation than I am. Right. I may be the expert in the room on the technology pieces. They're likely the expert on the value of the outcome. Right. And the effort of the input. Right. And so there's deference to be given on both sides. It's not just one-sided.
Yeah.
And when we fail to do that, well, bad things happen. Like very bad things happen.
So in summary, which is how we started, I think it still exists. I think there's still a lot of work to do to overcome both of these problem sets. And it's leadership, right? It's individuals that have to both showcase that they can and should do it, and to encourage the rest of the team to show both of those sort of emotional values there.
I think it's a place where leading from the front becomes important. And this will be my final thought on this topic. I've been
Forever
talking
or just today?
Just today, just for this podcast.
I will never talk about
Nothing
it.
else is reasonable. We need to lead as leaders. We need to exhibit the attitude that we want our people to follow. We need to exhibit the empathy. We need to exhibit the deference. We need to exhibit the engagement. We need to exhibit the listening skills, right? We talk a lot about player coaching, but in this way, in all of the things that make up leadership, we are in fact player coaches. Right? So when you're in those things, stay engaged, stay involved, give deference and give empathy and show empathy, right? So that your people know this is how you expect the culture to be followed.
I empathize that you've been listening to this for 44 minutes already. Carlos, we should probably close.
Well, my friends, there you have it. Sometimes you don't care, others don't care, but at the end of the day, somebody needs to care. Take the time to understand the other person on the other side of the chat, the other side of the phone, so we can together accomplish what we had to do. My friends, make sure that you share, you subscribe, and we'll see you in our next episode.